Dr. Austin Tam-George joins us next. He's the Commissioner for Information in Rivers State. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And the thing about this is that, yes, we know in time past, even lately, there's always a lot of focus on the sand. And rightly so, too, many will say, because they've got that budget wherein whatever they do there will have its huge implications on the economy. But the states, they also play a huge role. That's where people resign. That's where development takes place. And many, at the moment, think the states not just pulling their weights, in spite of several budgetary allocations to them. Why do you think this perception is?
Well, I think it's fair to say that over the years, since 1960, there has been a failure of government. I mean, if we want to be honest about it, the social contract that ought to exist between the people and the government says that the people confer legitimacy on the government, and the government will render services to the people. Simple as that. But we haven't seen the government, acting out its own part of the social contract. So what we've seen is that there has been a failure of leadership in terms of providing critical infrastructure. We used to have one of the best educational systems in the Commonwealth, actually second only to Canada. But down the line, I think we lost our way because there were military interventions in the public space, and then this social contract simply wasn't effective. We've also seen that certain basic services such as water supply, education, health infrastructure were simply abandoned. So you would understand that there has been an endemic, some kind of endemic skepticism on the part of the people. Whenever they encounter the government, they seem to encounter the government as a predatory force rather than as a service force. So I think what we are seeing now, has been a change in trajectory. We now have the federal government, controlling a central part of the national budget. But the people are geographically dispersed in all the 36 states. So it falls upon state governments to provide as much services to the people as possible. Are they doing this? I think the story changes from one state to the other. It's a mixed result.
Let's attempt to trace it. One area which they all have in common, they have their national assemblies, states assemblies. And then the phraseology used about them, describing them, is they're just an appendage of the executive. And so that's a place where things need to change.
Typically, when you have three arms of government, the legislature plays a very important role. They make the laws, and they also make sure that the executive is held in check. Of course, the judiciary interprets the law. So what we are seeing is that increasingly, the line between the legislature and the executive seems to be getting more and more blurred, especially in the states. In my own state, for instance, over the past 8 years, we saw a situation where the state assembly wasn't effective. The state assembly at a point was meeting right in one of the executive chambers of the executive arm of government. We didn't have a proper separation until, of course, the Wike-led administration came into office. And, the assembly started meeting in its own premises, promulgating its own laws.
Even from 1999,
yes,
different legislative arms of government in different states, we've seen how they've evolved. We've seen how some thought they could impeach a governor in a particular way, and the courts thought otherwise. And it just went on. And are we actually moving forward in terms of maybe targeting that time or that scenario wherein the states' houses of assembly will be completely independent? Or is there any such thing?
In Rivers State, where I come from, the separation can't be more evident. As I said, in the past 8 years, we didn't have that kind of division. What we had was, a situation where the executive basically ran the business of the legislature. But now, as soon as the Governor Wike came into office, one of the first things he did, within the first few days actually, was to make sure that the legislative arm met in their own premises. And they made sure their allocations were directly made to them. So this distance, this kind of distance that you need in a constitutional democracy, where the executive arm does its business and the legislature, does the kind of oversight responsibilities that we know it constitutionally ought to do, has been very clear in Rivers State. In other states, I think the results are a lot more mixed. What we need in terms of ideal situation would be for the executives to simply execute and then for the legislature to exercise oversight responsibilities, and where there are clashes, for the judiciary to simply interpret.
But we know that, sorry to interrupt you, but we
Yeah.
know that that has nothing to do, I mean, whether or not they maintain a distance, it's not about the distance. For a lot of people, it's about legislative independence, because legislative, in most states, tends to no toe to the executive arm of government because they still depend on them to a large extent for their funds. At the federal level, it's very different. The legislature gets its money's first line charge. Does that happen in your state?
Yes, it does. Actually, what happens, and that's why I talk about distance. The distance is not so much an infrastructural distance in terms of different buildings. It is actually an operational distance. The executive does its business. For instance, I mean, when the governor wanted to present the budget, he had to leave the executive chambers along with members of the executive council. And we went to the legislature and said, this is the budget for 2016.
You're saying that the budget
Yes.
of the legislature, I mean,
Yes.
that's the legislature in your state, they get their money's first line charge without any interference from the executive. Is that what you're saying?
No interference. They will give them what they want, and then, you know, these things are appropriated in the first place. As soon as the budget is passed, it becomes law. So what is due to the legislature, they get. What is due to the judiciary, they get. In fact, in my own state, what happened again over the past 2 years was that the legislature, especially, and the judiciary, especially, you know, the state courts simply didn't function because of a crisis engineered by the former administration. So what we had, as soon as we came into office, was to say from day one, the judiciary should operate. Whatever was their due financially was simply given to them.
Let's break it down. We were asking what states are bringing to the table when we talk about state of economy. Every time we talk about the economy, you wake up, you get to find one comment or rule or directive from maybe the government at the center or the CBN, and a lot of people are bothered asking questions about states and what states can do. They have been bailed out, a couple of states, and we say the way already analysts are saying that the way things are going, some of these states will be needing bailout in the days to come. Now we have the budgetary allocation by most of the states, yours inclusive. It will seem as if some of the states haven't gone, you know, into their inner recess to see what they can do to become more vibrant and stay out of trouble in the days to come. What do you think states are not doing in the light of the economic downturn that we have witnessed in the country? Or we're witnessing, rather?
Well, you know, there has been, since 1958, this overdependence on natural resources, you know, on the extractive economy, where, you know, we're just basically dependent on rent from oil and gas. Now we've seen commodity prices collapsing all around us over the past 1 year. And what that has meant is that we can no longer afford the luxury of simply talking about, you know, diversifying the economy. We must make sure that we actually diversify the economy in order to widen and diversify our revenue collection. What we are doing in Rivers State is slightly different. What the governor has said is, look, our greatest asset is not so much oil and gas as much as our own people. And so we are not only gravitating away from the extractive economy, we are not just going into agriculture, we are investing massively in the knowledge economy, because that is the next frontier. We believe that, look, what we need to do is to make sure we invest in human capital development. At the center, what we are hearing about, you know, the rhetoric we are getting at the center is that we want to gravitate, you know, towards agriculture. But you see, the truth is that agriculture has always been with us. Agriculture has always been with us, employs over 70% of our manpower. But yet we are not food sufficient. Why is that? We still import rice from Thailand and Malaysia. Why is that? I think the answer is that although we've been in agriculture over the past 50, 60 years, we haven't mechanized it. In Rivers State, the recognition is that we are not just mechanized, we are not just moving away from the extractive economy to the agricultural sector. We want to invest in the knowledge economy in such a way that we will invest in research and development, so that by the time we move into agriculture, the intention is not simply to continue with this perpetual cycle of subsistence farming. We want to mechanize the sector, and to mechanize the sector, you need investment in research, you need investment in development in terms of the agronomy. So what we are doing is, a tripartite focus. We focus on the extractive economy, we focus on agriculture, and we focus on knowledge.
Let's look at it broadly, away from your state. What do you think states can do? If you talk about investing in knowledge-based technology that can help drive such sectors, we have key sectors in different states, and every state they have their own forte. Some have their own agricultural prowess, while some others have some other that they can harness. What do you think the states can do, looking at what we have witnessed, especially just before the elections?
First of all, I think there should be investment in human capital development. The UN just released a report over the past 4 months or so, emphasizing sustainable development. And if you look at that report, the key emphasis, what makes sustainability lasting, is the emphasis on manpower training, capacity building, because oil and gas, resource-driven economies are going to go into trouble, because eventually these are wasting assets. But if you invest in human capital development, you see, people get knowledge and they get into research, they get into development. I mean, look at the person who created WhatsApp. He doesn't work in Shell or work in Chevron. He simply looked at the technology of BlackBerry and dynamized it in a way that today over 500 million people use WhatsApp. So the point is, he sold it, of course, to Facebook for about $19 billion or so. So the next frontier is the knowledge economy. It's not so much, whether we are interested in oil and gas. What I think, a situation where, states simply can't pay salaries because federal allocation has dropped, I think it's a scandal. We need to tap into the genius of our own people, invest in human capital development. That's what we are doing in Rivers State.